Well, LZ Albany was, when we got there, it was dark. It just started to be dark. And so the helicopter came in. The battalion only owned this little copse of trees that was like maybe 40 yards long and 10 yards wide or something. And then they had a little piece of grass. The LZ was on a slant, and the low side of the slant there was full of North Vietnamese soldiers. The top side of the slant was full of North Vietnamese soldiers, but they had a place you could land two helicopters. So we came in. I was in the first chopper only because I always had maps, and part of my job was to find out where we really were, when we went places. And so we come in, and the helicopter flares, and the shooting is there's green tracers going all over the place through the helicopter, and we're all going, oh shit! And the pilot pulled pitch and got us out of there. So we all went, thank God, it's just we're not going to have to do this, because this is too dangerous. But somebody came around again, right? And the second time around, 10 feet off the ground, they kicked us out, right? So jumped out of the chopper, and as soon as the choppers pull off, it's all quiet. I open my eyes, right, and I'm staring directly into the face of a dead North Vietnamese soldier. Rick Viscola, meanwhile, was standing up, and he swaggers on into the copse of trees and said, well, here we are, and they're cheering. The cavalry had come to the rescue, right? And there was only about 16 of us, right? And so the cavalry had come to the rescue, and Rick says, and I hope they hit us tonight because we'll kill them all. And, and we're all going, okay, Rick, So we licked one another's wounds or whatever, and there are people that argue with me about how many choppers got in and what it was, and so I'm buying my two choppers. And later on, they did get some choppers in with ammo and water, and they took out some wounded guys, but not much happened until daylight the next morning. But anyway, who came in with me was this guy Livio Pagani, who was a Spec 5, and he was the assistant FDC guy for our mortars. And I don't think there was anybody else from the mortar platoon that got in besides him and me. And there was a mortar that A Company, 1st of the 7th, had brought in that they had gotten to the LZ, right? They had they gave us the mortar, and there was a pretty decent sized hole, and we stuck the mortar in the hole on the perimeter, just where we had air assaulted. I'm looking across at the bad guys on this little landing strip, and they collected all the mortar ammunition that was around, right? And they brought that over to us. And so Livio and I sat there with this mortar, and about midnight, Rick Viscola comes over and he says, "What do you got for ammunition?" And I said, "Well, we got 5 illumination rounds and we got 3 high explosive rounds." So he says, "Do you think you can pop those 5 illumination rounds in a line right over the top of where we are? We're trying to get some fast movers in, meaning jets, and they don't know where we are, and it's dark here, and we need to be able to define the perimeter a little bit." So I said, yeah, but I was completely incompetent to do that, but I didn't know what else to say to him. But Livio, who was much more experienced mortarman than I was, he could do it. Right? So he set the mortar up, and I fixed the rounds, and he cranked them. We synchronized our watches and whatever time it was, and we popped 5 rounds directly over. It was beautiful. And I don't know, 30 seconds after those rounds illuminated, the forest erupted around us with napalm and all kinds of crap from these jets. So that kept everybody's head down that was around us, It was just amazing and really extremely accurate. I'm sure there were some Americans that were killed in that napalm blast. But that's what happens, And anyway, we survived it. We weren't hit at all that night. There were some horrible things that happened outside the perimeter, horrible, horrible things. But as far as us little perimeter guys, our column was stretched out a mile down the trail that they walked in on. And the North Vietnamese spent the night going in and shooting the survivors and causing whatever mayhem they could. and they didn't bomb or napalm down that far down the column because they had no idea where things were. So yeah, so there was some awful things that happened there, and well, the next morning things were pretty quiet, and I mean there was no shooting going on, and me and about 5 or 6 other guys, we had coffee in our hands, and we were standing at the head of the trail that came into the LZ, right? And looking down into where the path was that came in. And this major shows up like with a 45 like this. He says, "I need some volunteers to go down to the ambush site," as things we said. And so what are we gonna do? We're standing there, So we go down with the major, right? And we go down there, and oh my God, it was a train wreck in the jungle, somebody said, and that's exactly what it was. It was like there were North Vietnamese and Americans, and and there was one North Vietnamese that was tied to the top of a tree that had been napalmed, and so we started taking in we took in the few live guys that there were, and then we took in start taking in the bodies, and then we started taking in the body parts, and they landed a Chinook, a couple of Chinooks to take out the dead. We lost 151 people there or something. And I remember this one particular Chinook that we were loading bodies into. These Chinooks were set up like ambulances, I guess. They had racks on the side of them, So of course they filled those first, and then they started laying them on the floor, and then they stacked them on the floor, and then the pilot said, "I'm out of here," right? He started revving the engines. And some lieutenant came around to the front of the helicopter, pointed an M16 at the pilot and said, "Leave this bird on the ground." And we loaded the thing to the ceiling. And then they closed the ramp doors. Blood and guts squeezed out of the hinges, right? And it flew off. And I don't know what that was like at graves registration when that got back, but that was, then we picked up all the weapons. We picked up all our weapons, all their weapons, and we didn't get any help. Nobody came in and helped us. And so so the combat troops, that's really not where you should be taking the combat troops. But that's what happened. And then we were there. We spent 2 more nights, I guess. And then they pulled us out. And then they took us back to Ankh in trucks. And as I remember, there were like 4 trucks for the battalion to take us back. It was awful. So we went back to lick our wounds, and at base camp, and and take head counts and stuff. And the first sergeant asked us what our casualties were and stuff, and so we told him, and he said, that new guy you sent us? I said, "What's his name?" John Cahill, right? So we reported John Cahill as being wounded and sent off, triage or whatever. Well, about the first week in December, the end of the first week in December, here comes John Cahill back. They patched him up and they sent him back to us. And he soldiered bravely on for the rest of the tour, and ended up as a mortar gunner and then as a squad leader, got a sergeant's stripes when he left.